Good morning. I'm Steve Wolf, Wholesale Marketing Rep at Sprague Energy.
And I'm Joel Williams, Director of Refined Product Sales here at Sprague Energy.
Welcome to Sprague's Refined Products Review, where we share what's moving the market and the insights we see every day. Well, Joel, it's been quite a headline flurry since last week. What's going on with Iran lately?
Transits are way down within the strait, so we really don't see much coming through at all. Each day you hear transits are going down, you hear about more attacks on different ships each day. And so, really we're kind of back to where we were before the MOU. And, one of the scary things about that, obviously, is when the MOU came out, Trump came out and was pretty honest that, one of the main reasons for the MOU was because, we were headed towards some very big economic uncertainty with the strait being closed that was going to impact the entire world. So I don't think a whole lot has changed. What he said then was true, and what he says, what it is now is true. So again, we'll have to wait and see here. As we all know, I mean, diplomacy still, I think, is the
Right.
hope for the end here for everybody. But we're a lot farther away from it this week than we were last week, and as such, the risk premium in the market is exploded. Everyone's seen. Unfortunately, we've been doing a ton of middays lately,
Right.
and that's just in reaction to what the market's doing. It's going straight up, and unfortunately, we're having to follow it right there. So again, let's wait and see what happens here. But quite a bit going on there.
So how has that affected the transits in the strait? It's been a topic that we've touched on the past few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you look down, it's down to a handful of transits right now. So, we did see people large exodus out of the strait, and now I think again, that's what we talked about last week is, um, our ship's going to go back in. I think that's the big question. And when you look about, particularly for the oil industry,
Yeah.
you have to go in, you have to load with oil, then you have to go and drive it out. And natural gas as well. Natural gas potentially even more volatile, obviously. A lot more explosive of a product to be holding. But it's when you were sitting in the strait and waiting to get out, and you had a window, getting out made sense. You really wonder whether the captains and the owner of these ships are now going to say, I got to make that transit twice, as well as I got to spend some time in the strait. Do I want to be stuck there again? So that's kind of what we're going to be watching. It's really just unfolding as we speak. So hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have a little bit more info on that.
You mentioned, right, that crude was leaving the strait, but right, it does seem like there's some tightness in the refined products from the crude.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, Steve. And I think, that's probably a great point for us to maybe transition this conversation. We've spent a lot of time talking about the Strait and about Iran for the last several months. And, the narrative is actually shifting right now. Something very major has been going on right underneath our noses that we've kind of hinted around, but we haven't really hit head on. And that's the fact that, yeah, is the price of oil up? Sure. And that's an impact. But the real issue we have right now is the distillate shortage. And distillate prices are way outpacing the rest of the market. And so when I say shift the narrative, I think what we got to, as much as we need to still talk about Iran, we need to acknowledge the Russia Ukraine war and what's been happening there. I mean, if you see what Ukraine has done since, August of last year, there's been 25 refineries that have been struck in Russia. And it's over 50% of Russians' refining capacity is offline, and that's been a major hit to the distillate market. Russia is a huge, exporter
Right.
of distillate products, and now that they're not doing that, other people are having to make up, for that, and it's creating a worldwide distillate shortage. And if you look at this chart, you can see that it was substantial. 1 to 1.2 million barrels a day of distillates were coming out of Russia in prior years. That number is down to 300. And given the announcement of a recent export ban, that number could be going basically to zero. What kind of strain is it creating? Well, I mean, just look at Pad 1A and Pad 1B, the Northeast of the US. And you look at our distillate stocks right now, and we are at or approaching all-time lows. And the scary thing about these numbers, yeah, we've been this low before, but there's no end in sight. These numbers are going to go lower. I think that's we'll keep watching it, but it would appear at this point these numbers are headed lower. So let's see what happens there. And then when you look at Europe, it's even scarier. I mean, Europe is well below where it's ever been before, and it's headed straight down when we look at where the forecast is. And those things combined are really creating a ton of challenges for the distillate market.
And right, you mentioned Russia limiting the diesel. What is that going to do to prices?
Let's look at 2 points in time. February 18th, that was before the Iran war, and July 13th, yesterday. Again, we're filming on Tuesday. This is Monday settles. If you look at it, the price of WTI crude, you could use Brent crude, any of them are going to be in the relatively similar area here. But if you look at that back in February, on a per gallon basis, crude costs $1.55 a gallon. Right now, it costs $1.86 a gallon. So yeah, up 30 cents. That's a significant increase, 20%. But it's not, you know, in terms of the overall distillate market, prices moving 30 cents, not the end of the world. What you then take a look at is that at the end of the day, what we look at in our market is where's the price of a distillate. In this case, we're looking at diesel in New York Harbor. And each day that cash price comes out, Argus posts it. We all use that kind of the price off of. And you'll see the price was 256, back in February, and it's 384 now. So it's a dollar 30 more a gallon now. And what's the difference there? Well, again, crude was that 30 cents. But the next thing is crude comes into the US, it gets bought by a refinery. The refinery goes through a complex, refining process, and, multiple products come out the other side. In this case, we're looking at diesel. And then they go and they sell that product to the market. Again, they get the cash price in New York Harbor, if we're looking at an example in our market. And so if they were paying 155 for that crude and selling it for 256 back in February. So the crack spread was a dollar, meaning the refiners are getting paid a dollar for their work. And again, there's all kinds of costs that come out of that between the RINs and the tolling costs and things like that. But if you look at where that is now, that spread's almost doubled to $2. Again, those costs haven't changed substantially. So what you're just seeing is the refiners are making a ton more money off diesel. And it's not like they can just make this money because, there's no reason for it. I mean, it's supply and demand. At the end of the day, the Russian refineries being offline, the fact that in the US, we've seen several refineries the last couple of years shut down. I know there's two more in California scheduled to shut down in the next 12 months. And these refineries are older refineries, and they're just not worth reinvesting in. But those are closing down, and then you are not rebuilding new refineries in the U.S. You look at that, and you also look at the fact that, yeah, while gasoline is kind of in a structural decline, we're seeing electric cars, things like that. Electrification on the distillate side isn't as big. Obviously, yeah, there's some heat pumps, and we all know about that in our markets. But construction, freight, agriculture are all still going strong. Diesel, electricity generation is growing even stronger as we've seen these surges in demand for electricity. Diesel's made it up. These data centers and these AI centers are going up everywhere. They're running off diesel, backup generators. So overall, diesel demand has been pretty strong. And as you see the supply of diesel going down, the demand staying the same, yeah, prices go up. And then you add into the Russian refinery issue, as well as the fact there's Middle East refineries that are offline that are not making it. And all of a sudden you see this explosion in crack spreads. And that's really why you've seen the two outpace. And that's why we really wanted to kind of shift this, the discussion here from crude to the actual price of distillates, knowing that many of our customers out there are dependent on diesel and heating oil.
So over the past couple of weeks, we had saw backwardation ease, but with the recent events, what's that look like now?
Yeah, I mean, the backwardation's back in full effect, and that's something that we all have to take a look at. I think what you've seen is that a lot of things are traded on the headlines in Iran, but as the fundamentals of what's happening in Russia and this shortage of distillates is kind of exposed itself, you're seeing the fundamentals take over, which is a little bit scary because when the fundamentals take over, it's harder to move the market. And in terms of backwardation, we've talked about this before. It's the market's tool to incentivize anyone who has distillates in storage right now to sell them. And it's saying, we're going to give you a premium for selling them today, and if you hold them, we're going to punish you. And it's a self-correcting mechanism within the market. If you look at this, what you have here is, we're currently in July, and you can take a look at the August settle. This is, again, the settles from last night on Monday the 13th. 382, and then we look at where the settles for each of the future months. These are the same months that people will be buying their forward curves and everything else off of. And what it is, it's sort of the market's view of where the forward prices are going to be at. And backwardation means that each month is cheaper than the prior month. So as we go out, and when you look at this number, this month 382, next month 372, 361, 349, you're looking throughout this curve all the way through April of next year when heating season ends, and you're talking, almost 9, 10 cents a month is what you're looking at backwardation. And um, for the layperson, what that really means is that if I bought the molecule today at 382, let's say take next month, let's say the beginning of next month, the price is at 372 as it suggests here. If I bought the diesel molecule at 372 and held it to the end of the month, did nothing else, hedged my product and kept it fully hedged, at the end of the month, it'd only be worth 361. So it would have lost, in that case, 11 cents in value. And what that means is that that's part of the inventory cost. And so when you're doing that, again, it's creating an incentive to sell and an incentive not to carry. So it's going to make it very hard for people in our industry to hold on to product this winter. Those type of costs are extremely expensive. So people are going to be becoming really hand to mouth with their product. The supply chains are going to be challenged because, again, when you have no inventory, you have no buffer. You can't make a mistake. And we all know that in the winter, demand can go up and down rapidly. Shipping can be a problem. Weather can be a problem. Hurricane season could be very challenging this year. You're taking an already fragile supply chain and even making it more so. And so, part of what will have to happen is, unfortunately, diffs are probably going to have to rise because this is a severe cost of doing business. And as such, that cost is going to have to be passed on. So I think, when I talk to any of our customers, what I would really be focusing on is the fact that, there isn't going to be a lot of extra length out there this winter. And to make sure that your relationships are where you want them to be and that you have a plan and that you're talking to your suppliers about it. And again, this has gotten, in the last week, this narrative changed a lot. But again, I think the fundamentals are taking over here. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this persists. And if it holds at these levels, it's going to be a very, very challenging winter for us in the supply situation. Again, I feel like we positioned ourselves well, between being an incredible trader in New York Harbor. Sprague has got 150 years of experience of that, having Hartree behind us with all its ability to help us supply as well. And also Hartree's ability to help us navigate these complex financial markets and this backwardation. I think we're going to be in good shape, but the reality is that we're going to really have to do a very good job of planning what our demand is and carrying the minimum inventory to meet what that demand is. And so, as such, we're going to be coming out to our customers and asking, what are your needs this winter? What do you need? And we're going to work with you to figure out, structure a way for us to have a good understanding of what we need to carry for you. Because honestly, all we're going to be able to afford is what you're going to need. And if the market falls down and other people come, we're going to want to know what do we need to keep you, our best customers, wet. And then there's going to be very little extra to pad people, new customers coming in and things like that if we haven't talked to you before the season, it's going to be a challenge to find a way to fuel you within the season if things play out the way that we see they very well could and the way the market's indicating they are going to.
Certainly a lot to digest. Any last words for our viewers?
Challenging times require cooperation and coordination. And I think that's what we're asking for with our customers. And, if they're willing to pledge that cooperation and coordination with us, we're going to find a way to meet their needs. That's what we do. It's what we've always done. So, again, we'll keep an eye on the news here. A lot of this can change. But, each week it's very interesting to watch. But, we keep getting closer to the season. And again, these fundamentals keep, peeking their head out of the shell. And it seems like, it's starting to become what we're talking about in theory is starting to feel a lot more real as we get closer to the season starting here.
Well, that's all we have for you this week. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out our latest special feature, an overview of Sprague's forward contract programs, available now on our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another refined products review. Refine your insight.
Fuel your success. You want me to go to the next one?
No. I'm just looking at you first. Well, that's all we have for you this week. And hold on.